What's up, you fellow mudders out there? You're watching the Michigan Mud Outdoor YouTube channel. I'm Aaron, and today we're going to talk about one-piece scope mounts for your AR style rifle. This is my 450 Bushmaster. This is my Michigan deer hunting rifle. This is, in my opinion, the most important rifle in my fleet because this is the rifle I use for harvesting my deer. This is a Bushmaster upper, 20-inch free float barrel on an Aero Precision lower. I have a Rock River National Match 2-stage trigger. The scope on this gun is a Nikon Black Edition Tactical. I've owned this gun since the release of the 450 Bushmaster round. That round has made a big impact in lower Michigan hunting. The southern Michigan, there's a divider line. Anything north of that divider line, you can use Magnum cartridges. South of that divider line, you can only use pistol and shotgun cartridges for deer hunting. When the 450 Bushmaster came out, it was classified as a straight wall pistol cartridge, and the lengths and dimensions on that cartridge meet within the maximum for lower Michigan hunting regulations. I believe those regulations are similar in Ohio. So I've had this gun for, I'm going to say, about 8 years. The first 4 years, no issues. I originally had a Browning 3x9 30mm optic on here. After 4 years of use, that optic, it got wore out. The seals must have gone bad because I ended up getting condensation inside the lens. In the cold winter, it would freeze up, leaving the scope unusable. It would completely blur out the scope. So with the scope malfunctions, my go-to hunting rifle was down for the count. I ended up having to switch back to my 20 gauge shotgun. And I ran the shotgun for 2 years. Until I picked up this scope, the Nikon Tactical Black. When I'm buying a scope mount, that's probably the most stressful part of assembling a rifle to me. I remember when I was younger, I'd go with my dad, and we would be in the store where you can physically pick up, feel, and touch what you're about to buy. Online shopping has made that very difficult. Most retailers no longer hold enough stock to build exactly what you want to. So that leads us to online retail. So if you type in one-piece scope mount search here, there's quite a few options. On a rifle like this with the Picatinny rail, the one-piece scope mount is really the way to go. But which one to pick is the question. Now, when I was trying to mount this scope, I looked through many options, spent quite a few hours trying to find the right set of rings. I really wanted to go with a Vortex. I've been fairly impressed with the products they've been putting out. A lot of their Viper scopes they're nice scopes. For the money and the glass quality, it's hard to beat. This Vortex sight had my attention for quite some time. I don't know, I'm not a fan of the quick detach theory here. Once I get my scope set and invest in blasting a couple boxes of rounds, just to really be comfortable with my setup, I don't want to somehow clip one of these and then have it back on the Picatinny rail slightly different. Now, with these, they say on a Picatinny rail mount, if you remove your scope and put it back on, it's going to repeat. I have a hard time with that. I feel like there is still, if you have a loose, if you put this on your Picatinny rail and you have it loose, there is some play forward and back. A little bit left and right. So I might be just being skeptical here, but once I set my scope, I don't want it moving anywhere, especially if I'm trying to shoot at ranges of 200, 250 yards and be repeatable. And this being a hunting rifle, I would hate to put a poorly placed shot on an animal and then start racking my brain on what happened. Was it nerves? Was it the damn quick release scope mount? I don't know. I'd rather just stay away from that. So after a few hours of searching, I ended up stumbling across this UTG brand 30mm one-piece scope mount. Selling price of $34. When I purchased this, it was in the depths of bro bread, and I believe I spent $50 on this. Thumbing through these pictures here, this photo here, this is mounted on a 50 caliber rifle. That's ridiculous. I don't think this thing should be mounted on a 22 caliber rifle. Here we have it mounted on an AR. This one's on an Armalite with an AccuShot scope. Pretty cheap scope as well. So I made the mistake of purchasing this, and one of my justifications is I have a good friend. He has a Remington 700 with a bull barrel. He has this thing decked out. It's in a Macmillan stock, glass bedded. He got custom paint work on this thing, and it's a tack driver. It really is. He ended up getting a Leupold UTG scope. I would personally never buy that scope for such a high dollar rifle. I think he's got about 3,000 into this rifle, and he put a $150 scope on top of it. When I was growing up, my dad always told me, Aaron, whatever you invest in your rifle, you need to match that dollar value in your optic. So on my 450, I matched rifle to optic, but I did not match the quality on the scope mount. I ended up going with this, justifying it with my buddy's purchase, and it burned me. It burned me bad. So the first time I took this out, I ended up mounting the new scope on the UTG one-piece mount. So it sat in my safe for probably a year and a half before I broke her out of the safe. Ended up getting it sighted in, used a couple boxes of ammo to sight her in. The problem arose the first day of opening season this year. Went out, was sitting in my stand. It was beautiful, just got a fresh snowfall. And looked down and my scope is crooked. Didn't drop it, nothing. 2 of the 8 bolts snapped. When I got back, I ended up trying to extract those 2 bolts, and in the process of disassembling and getting my scope out of the way to make sure that I didn't have any issues, a 3rd one snapped. So 3 out of 8 bolts snapped on this scope mount the first time I took it out in the field. Alright, so here's the scope mount that I purchased off of Amazon. This is the UTG AR 32250. I had this scope mount mounted on my gun first day during hunting season. I ended up having a malfunction. The malfunction was with the hardware. Looking at this scope mount, first impressions, I really have no complaints with the machining. The machining looks pretty nice. I do like these multiple relief cuts in here. Gives it an interesting look. Really separates it from the other options. The finish is an anodized aluminum. I'm not 100% in love with it, but it is as expected. Any gun parts that are anodized tend to just have that dry feeling, you know, real chalky. For the money, I was willing to accept that. Biggest problem I have with this scope mount is, as you can see here, there's 3 of the 8 bolts that snapped. These bolts ended up snapping at the worst time. They snapped during the opening day of the 2022 deer season. I did everything to prepare and make sure that I would have the most enjoyable hunting trip as possible, and this really left me down on my luck. Ended up having to switch back to my shotgun for the remainder of the season. It wasn't a very eventful season, but this was definitely the biggest bummer. After the season ended, I ended up going back and spending countless hours of review, trying to identify what set of rings I wanted to replace this with. Ended up going back to my first 2 choices, Here we have the Leupold Mark AR. And then I also went back to looking at the Vortex and variants that did not have the quick release. Leupold is a trusted name. It's a name that my dad has always approved of and put on his hunting rifles. This scope mount ended up costing me $100. And in the grand scheme of things, I should have just spent the $100 in the first place instead of going through the hassle of trying a cheaper option. When I started telling this story to my friends, the first thing that was said to me is, Aaron, clearly you over-torqued it. This is the torque wrench that I own. I've owned this torque wrench for about 5 years. I have the previous version of this. Mine came with a really nice case. My replacement scope mount came with a Leupold recommended torque spec card in the packaging of the item. The UTG scope mount that failed did not come with a manufactured recommended torque spec as my Leupold replacement did. This is my Wheeler torque wrench. This item is called the Fat Wrench from Wheeler Engineering. It comes with a calibration card, which comes with a nice pamphlet and user instructions. On page 2 of the pamphlet, we have 3 categories on here: commonly used on scope base mounts, commonly used on scope rings, and commonly used on scope base windage screws. The center row here is the one we're focusing on, commonly used for scope rings. The recommended torque spec for these items are 28 to 30 inch-pounds. So on this torque wrench, you can spin the bottom dial and set it to 28 to 30 inch-pounds. Following the Wheeler Engineering torque specs is exactly what I did when I installed this scope mount to my gun. Going back to the Amazon page, I think it's interesting to take a look at these reviews. So it has a 4.7 out of 5, 83% 5 stars, 10% 4 stars, 3% 3 stars, 2 and 2 for 1 and 1, or 1 and 2 stars. We have quite a few photos, very similar setup to mine. AR mount with a Vortex. Here we have a scope mount on what appears to be Ruger 22 bolt action rifle. Wow, this is an interesting setup. So we have an AR-15 pistol. We have the pistol brace on here. This looks like it's an SBR. This is a short barrel with a quick attach suppressor lug. Looks like we have a laser sight, a scope. Then I'm not sure if this is attached to the top or what. Here's another one, the Sig Sauer. This guy did the same thing I did. Bought an expensive scope and put it on a shit mount. Armalite AR lower, Nikon scope. Interesting. Let's take a look at these low reviews here. I've seen quite a few reviews where it says this mount will not fit my UTG compact scope. These UTG scopes are very small. My buddy that has the $150 scope on his $3,000 Remington 700 build, he also has a compact UTG scope, and I remember he had to get separate rings because the spacing's so narrow on those. This individual, he called his review set screw issues. Another did not fit my scope length. Does not fit Vortex crossfire. What a bad mount. Did not fit the UTG compact. Not for 450 Bushmaster. May hold up to 5.56 or 300 blackout, but would not stand up to the 450 Bushmaster. Nice finish and lightweight. Looks good on the rifle, but wouldn't stand the recoil of a 450. Junk. Stripped out. Screws first time on rifle. Returned and got an arrow precision. $30 more, 100% better. Run. Find another option. Had bought the UTG 1x8. This mount came with it. The optic itself was okay, but the mount is a POS. Day came when I needed to take the mount off and one of the screws had seized up on me. Tried to do everything to remove the screws, but had to resort to drilling it out. Ended up marring the railing and side of my handguard. Do yourself a favor and find something better. Take a look at some 2-star reviews here. Be very careful with this mount. This guy's complaining that he torqued it to 25 inch-pounds and it left some dents in his scope. The biggest disappointment on this scope mount is it was $50 when I purchased it. Going to the range and putting rounds down range to make sure I trust this rifle to be in a situation where I'm going to be harvesting an animal. So I think I used 2 boxes of 450 Bushmaster. Those are about anywhere from $39 to $50 a box. So right there between a $50 scope mount, 2 $50 boxes, that's $150. I could have bought an arrow, I could have bought the Leupold, I could have bought the Vortex for over $100 and I would be ahead of the game. One of the main reasons why I made this video is because I posted a review on Amazon. After posting my review, this is what I received from Amazon. Thank you for submitting a customer review on Amazon. After carefully reviewing your submission, your review could not be posted to the website. It appears your content did not comply with our guidelines. While we appreciate your time and comments, reviews must adhere to the following guidelines. All I simply stated on here was, nice base, but the hardware sucked. 3 out of 8 mounting bolts broke during my first day in the field. Purchased this scope mount for my 450 Bushmaster, spent the money on a good gun, spent the money on a good scope, cheaped out on the scope mounts. I like the mount, but I got burnt. So because Amazon decided that my review and my honest feedback was not good enough for their guidelines, that's why I'm putting this video out there, to make sure no one else gets burned by this UTG scope mount. So I think that's going to wrap up this video, guys. If you have any questions about this review, if you think I did a terrible job and I should never do a review again, let me know. Meanwhile, I'm going to throw this thing away. If you like what we talked about, hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment. See you next time on the Michigan Mud Outdoors channel. I'm Aaron.